Inside Out 2. Beloveds. This movie was an incredible comeback for Pixar, still holding strong as the biggest animated movie of all time. Considering just a couple years back the conversation was that the studio was struggling to compete theatrically, this turnaround was huge. I mean, before this, the whole reputation of Pixar was damaged by a failed Disney CEO who demoted their movies to Disney Plus under the philosophy that they're better valued on there. But $1.5 billion later, it's hard to see that perspective. Although admittedly, I'm still pretty cynical on this victory for a couple of reasons, and it's tough because otherwise, I'm ecstatic that an animated movie is still the highest grossing movie of the year. However, for one, this is very much a giant message to Disney that Pixar is most profitable when making sequels. I mean, we already knew that Toy Story 5 was coming out, but since this release, we've had news of Incredibles 3 being confirmed, and that they're looking at options for both a Monsters Inc. sequel and Inside Out 3 as well. Not to mention the Cars arm is absolutely thinking about doing future projects, so yay. The resulting business outline of alternating between sequel and original movie each year reads as about as corporate as you can get. I'm pretty sure current CEO Bob Iger even said the originals are important so they can make more sequels. We love a sequel bannery farm. But even worse than that, of course, was the behind-the-scenes drama that went on at the studio during this production that we've been covering on the channel. As we learned with Across the Spider-Verse last year, it can't be as simple as just having a solid movie without some horrific production story to go with it. And just like that movie, it does dampen the enjoyment of this movie a bit. Nonetheless, we're going to be diving into the movie anyway, so here we go. The opening of the movie fires us straight into the action with Riley playing hockey and manages to strike the balance of providing a refresher of the core concept and also a sense of getting on with it. Definitely a wise decision. Whilst most people are generally good with what's going on, I know some people who hadn't rewatched the first movie in years and just went straight into this one. We immediately see every emotion's function in the action itself, both reintroducing how they all work together, but also showing how that's evolved because of the events of the first film. We see that the memories are now all a mix of emotions, as well as how that's playing out in real time. Joy introduces each of the central emotions before we see exactly what role they play in Riley/our everyday lives.
And that's fear, keeping Riley on her toes.
Before we get any more detail, we've already had the core concept reintroduced in a way that most people who've never even seen the original would immediately get what's going on here. And when the movie takes a breather to recap us on what Riley's at in life,
Anderson goes to the box, 2 minutes for tripping.
it's literally Riley taking a break in the game. It's a simple touch, but it's just a reminder that Pixar are still some of the smoothest storytellers out there, with a meticulous writer's room behind it. The quick cut through of Riley's life is also a seamless way to get some quick gags in there, but more importantly, giving Riley's home life some depth in an efficient way. I've brought up Trey Parker and Matt Stone of South Park fame with their storytelling principles before, but one of the big ones is that they also ensure that their gags further the character or story rather than just gags for the sake of them. Alas, they're always ragging on Family Guy. And I absolutely think the same applies here and throughout Pixar's filmography. Even the side gags you get whenever they introduce a new world, such as Monstropolis or the Great Barrier Reef, is at the service of the storytelling and enriching the world these movies take place in. It also means we can go through all the tropes we know about puberty, which we've seen on screen thousands of times before, whilst not dwelling too long on it. Outgrowing clothes, having braces, we know the drill. However, the USP of this movie, of course, is that we get to hear the commentary of the emotions over it.
Oh, that was our favorite shirt.
And yep, I noticed the Toy Story binoculars immediately on the first watch.
Family Island.
It's right there.
Remember who you're listening to. And that segues us to the first bit of new lore that this movie's adding, and that's how all these memories and personality islands feed into Riley's core beliefs.
I might call our masterpiece.
Part flooded brain cellar, part luxury spa that's probably gonna show up at Disneyland in the next 5 years. Fancy a bath with some giant marbles, anyone? As with the new emotions being introduced, I'm glad to see another example of the writers not being afraid to expand the concept. Of course, it does open those questions of why were the more complex emotions absent from Riley's parents in the first movie. Quick answer, the filmmakers weren't ready to overweight the first movie with those ideas, but losing that original back and forth scene of the parents' emotions would have been an absolute crime. They were all behind the curtain or something, I don't know. It's a big brain in there. Plus, the whole intrigue of this sequel would have been far less interesting if we'd already met the parents' versions of them. The whole premise of the movies are so abstract anyway that retcons like that, or indeed the core belief strands, ultimately don't matter. Through introducing the core beliefs, we also get some backstory of how Riley's made friends since moving.
I'm Riley. I'm a
Grace.
Once again, smoothly integrated, establishing her connection to these friends, even for these brief scenes, are important for us to invest in the rift that grows between them later. We need to see not only why they're friends, but what they mean to each other as well. We can understand the ultimate forgiveness of Riley despite her actions, because we've seen how good a friend she is in this earlier moment. This being the first moment her core beliefs sprout as well, just cements the positive foundations of the character and consequently gives some leeway to show her ugly attributes later. After the game, Riley and her friends are invited by the head coach to go on a 3-day skills camp.
Are we in a dream right now? Please, can somebody pinch me?
What can I say? I'm a slapstick guy. Quite a quick turnaround to keep the momentum of the storytelling, but you know, at least the coach admits it's last minute in the dialogue. And so now Riley's going away from home for the weekend.
We'll see you tomorrow.
Which does sideline the parents a bit in this one, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. We still get some parent emotion action in the upcoming car scene and towards the end, so they're still there, and these beats just wouldn't be as funny if there was more of them. Plus, leads quite nicely into puberty, you do distance yourself from your parents. And front and center, we are viewing this story from Riley's point of view, so throwing other people's emotions as a general rule would dilute the fact that this is her story. The glimpses we get are just enough, and removing Riley from the domestic setting that was central to the first film also just invites a new, interesting place to go with her. It all seems to be coming up Riley. However, as she goes to sleep, her body has other plans. But before that, we have a couple key bits. One, Joy has developed a new way of suppressing Riley's emotions. Yes, she hasn't totally learnt her lesson, this time shooting the more troubling memories off to the back of Riley's mind. Wonder if this will come back to haunt them later. However, the more wholesome beat that shows Joy has definitely grown since the last movie is when she takes sadness down to the belief system. Come on, who doesn't love that little bit where they hold each other's little fuzzy hands? In a movie that is often rampant in its pacing, it's great to see a couple slower moments like this one. And even then, it's still building the brickwork of the story as it's doing it. Even in the slower moments, not a single second's wasted. And the animation with the thousands of illuminated belief strands here is also just breathtaking. Despite this all taking place in a child's mind, the sense of scale in this movie is astounding. And I love how chaotic the subsequent puberty scene is. There's no real specificity to the invasion of emotional headquarters, they just absolutely wreck the place. Which, from my memory anyway, just encapsulates puberty perfectly. Except the getting tool button and the voice dropping button. For some reason those came when I was like 19, and even then I'm still waiting on the tool one. Both of my parents were 5'2". Honestly, it's a miracle I'm 5'9". Anyway, functionally, they really only needed to put the new console in. But no, they had to go and shred up the sofa as well, for no apparent reason. You got a chainsaw, might as well use it inside the brain. But that's puberty. All you needed was equipment upgrades, but off it goes, tearing your brain apart in the process. And of course, when Riley wakes in the morning, the results are laid bare.
I'm too gross to go anywhere ever again!
But here we get to see the full range of emotions firing at Riley, which if anything, is more accurate. And the lines in Mum's mind are absolutely on point as well.
Remain calm. Stick to the prepared script.
In my theater, the atmosphere was completely overcome with liberated parents absolutely dying at this scene. The teenagers they were with probably absolutely battered them for it afterwards, but I'm sure it was worth it.
Well, that's a preview of the next 10 years.
And so to the car scene, and...
Big weekend for us. What do you want to do?
Whoa, what's going on with the teeth there, buddy? I think we all know what the dad wants for the weekend. Anyway, moving on, as the girls are excited at the back, we get our first setup of the love interest that never was.
This Valentino Ortiz obsession is out of control,
said the Disney executives. Whilst it's apparent that Riley's fanaticism for Valentina could be interpreted for having a bit more to it, the story we get still works really well anyway. However, if it's true about the studio note simply saying, make Riley less gay, then it does leave a bit of a bad taste that they were that basic about it. Really paints a picture of how surface level corporate pride stuff really is. Anyway, I've covered that in a video before, so let's get back to the movie at hand. So what's great here is how they pull off the suspicions between the three of them through the tiniest details in body language and structure a whole scene around it. Between the three girls, we have the emotions in each camp deciphering the smallest changes in facial expression. It's something you can really emphasize in animation, but that does not mean it's easy to do. And just shows a profound study of human expression and behavior. It's also incredibly fitting that disgust is the character in each brain overanalyzing the drama. I think she's generally used a lot more in this movie than the first one, and I'm glad they found a place for her.
She's hiding something. But what?
I know Mindy Kaling didn't come back for this one, but I've got to say that Liza Lapira did such a good job in this one.
Build the team! we got assigned to a different high school.
So yes, we get the big drop that Grace and Bree have been assigned to a different high school, and Riley seemingly will have to start the new school experience all over again. And the emotions trying to hold sadness back until they're out of the car is yet another exceptionally observed piece of writing. With each turn in Riley's emotions, there's always a sense of truth underpinning what's on screen. You know that the animators are pulling these experiences through either observation or what they've experienced. And it doesn't even feel exaggerated, it just feels human. I love these details in this movie.
It's okay. We need this.
It's also one of the many helpful lessons to younger viewers throughout this. When we're younger, it can be confusing in that transition from childhood tantrums that can be somewhat controlled to crying in a way you have little control over. And so it's amazing to have a movie out there that says that's okay. Makes me wish there were more movies out there with male characters doing that, because not a lot of them do. But hey, maybe that's a long discussion to have for another day.
Get back in there, Tia.
The moment is, of course, short-lived as Riley quickly finds herself in the company of high schoolers.
Guys, these are high schoolers.
And within seconds, she bumps into Miss Ortiz herself.
Set the all-time goal record as a junior. Your favorite color's red.
Admittedly, as a Brit, the high school sports team session is a bit alien to me. In a British secondary school, you wouldn't exactly be seeing anyone idolize the captain of the school soccer team. I mean, they exist, but I wouldn't say they're a big deal unless you're one of the players. You're not putting up a poster of Jack Stevens from year 10 on the wall, I'll just say that. Nor would you know what his favorite character is. His best friend wouldn't even know that. Again, we need to have a big discussion about masculinity in a kids movie one day. That aside, in a world of Borat and The Office, it's rare to see a light-hearted cringe scene, which is very much what we get from here.
Riley, from Michigan, right?
And that is our cue to the moment it all changes.
Hello, everybody.
And right off the bat, you can see that they've nailed the anxiety character. There's the people-pleasing and talking without a proper pause for breath, but then there's even the subtler details. Her nervously moving up and down on her feet whilst others are talking is the tiniest of details, yet so well observed. My preference is always going to be having a professional voice actor, but fair play to Maya Hawke, as her performance in this is also fantastic here. And of course, she's not alone, as the rest of the new herd follow in her wake. Honestly, I'm surprised that all of them turned up so quickly. I figured this would be more of a gradual thing across the movie, but once you've introduced to the whole overthrowing the old emotion storyline, I guess it makes a lot more sense. First is Envy, who successfully piles the cringe on the situation.
I love the red in your hair. Oh,
The consequences then making the natural way for embarrassment. And I find it so funny that Paul Walter Hauser is credited for this character with one line in the entire movie. But it works a treat having this near-silent addition to the cast. Maybe a blessing considering how many there are now. He's also weirdly familiar, like you've definitely met this guy out there in the real world. As with all the emotions to a degree, we can definitely see ourselves in how he interacts with the rest of them, or lack thereof. Finally, we encounter Ennui.
It's what you would call the boredom.
There was a lot of questions about this one going into the movie. God forbid kids have to learn one word from another language. But I can definitely see why they went for Ennui as the name. It's definitely a lot more expressive than boredom, and personifying the character as a moody French teenager with a phone is a great fit. Wild though that an emotion has a technological phone in their hand. Like, did cavemen characters have emotions with phones? Or did boredom not exist back then? That's my only gripe about this character, if I had to find one. From here, we just further see how they have absolutely hit all the biggest swings with anxiety and establishing her as the main antagonist.
The next 3 days could determine the next 4 years of our life.
When anxiety comes into the picture, it takes over all other emotions after all. All of her dialogue here just summarizes the character and emotion she represents perfectly.
My job is to protect her from the scary stuff she can't see.
It's some really sharp writing. I can only imagine there was some consulting with psychologists whilst putting all this together. Scaring people about problems that usually aren't there and feeling right for doing it is the perfect personification of anxiety. She is definitely the biggest W from this movie. Her proceeding to doom scroll the worst case scenarios to everybody further cements that. So many people have grown up not sure how to identify that what they're experiencing is anxiety or explain to someone what they're going through. Whilst oversimplifying it on a case-by-case basis, I'm glad that there's now a movie to at least help explain that a little bit.
Remember when we all finally came up to...
Here's a minor detail I love. Nostalgia is literally wearing rose-tinted glasses. This character is on screen for seconds, yet they still built tiny jokes into her character design. I'm glad they found a way to get her in as a quick cameo, seeing as they're playing around with the emotional lineup, as it's a great bit and it wouldn't have made sense to keep her around, really.
Have about 10 years, 2 graduations, and a best friend's wedding before you're invited.
Technically, that's right. That's about where I am in life right now. But also, I leaned heavily on the nostalgic emotion like 12 years ago. I literally started YouTube when I was 15, being nostalgic about games I played when I was 7. As we enter the locker room, it becomes apparent that joy and anxiety don't see eye to eye. Even just summarizing it like that tells you how many levels this storytelling is running at.
That decision's not gonna haunt us for the rest of our lives at all.
This isn't helped by the fact that Joy makes a misstep when Riley, Bree, and Grace are caught goofing off as the coach comes in.
Ladies, settle in means settle down.
Once again, a situation I'm sure we've all experienced in some way.
Yes, coach.
As we know from the previous movie, Joy can be stubborn in getting her way and doubles down when anxiety tries to give a suggestion. Maybe if she'd listened, we would have saved a further hour of movie here. Whilst at the same time, you can absolutely understand both sides of the argument. Anyway, after some practice, Riley finds herself in a teenager's worst nightmare, or in other words, overhearing someone's completely unfiltered thoughts about you.
There's no way coach is putting her on the team if she can't get it together.
Jeez, screw this character. It does check out though with actual older teenagers. I remember people like this who acted as though they were seasoned adults when they were like 16. Such a shame their puberty built them with such punchable faces.
Oh, I got you, big guy.
And again, this movie shows the integration of the emotions mixing and working together, and how that looks externally arguably better than in the original. And of course, setting up embarrassment, trusting sadness later on. The way he's drooped over the console is hilarious too, though I like how Riley being embarrassed is not a comedy beat. Often, embarrassment is played up for laughs in any movie about high school kids. Any generic teenage comedy you can think of has one in there, usually with some elaborately awful slip-up that leads to a whole corridor of characters laughing at them. However, this is the embarrassment that feels real. The more minor moments of just overhearing someone say something unkind about you. The Pixar team know that they don't have to put Riley in an especially elaborate situation because the entire world inside her head will provide the spectacles and zaniness. In fact, the less remarkable the life event, the better. You have the ability in these movies to make the biggest dilemmas about the smallest details. Take the inside-out element out of this and you've basically just got a not particularly interesting sports movie about a girl trying to fit in at a weekend training camp. The genius of the movie is then managing to turn that into a huge-scale action comedy adventure without changing a single detail about what happens at that training camp. However, then anxiety seemingly solves the situation in a scene that weirdly mirrors the scene when Buzz first arrives in the original Toy Story. You know, the falling with style scene? Yeah, just like in that scene, anxiety also has her falling with style moment. To much admiration from other emotions, she at least seems to have resolved the problem with flying colors.
That's laying it on a bit thick, don't you think?
And yeah, Joy is definitely Woody in this, the old favorite who's now threatened with being replaced by a new leader.
I could do that. Oh, you guys, I mean, it really wasn't anything.
Honestly, in general, I'd say there's several similarities between Joy and Woody. I mean, both movies feature small living entities who live to serve human children. That's weird. The difference here, of course, is Buzz didn't banish the old toys for eternity, but we'll get there in a moment. And technically, the villain of the third movie in Toy Story did. Anyway, first we see Anxiety has more to her plan than she's let on, which leads us to the betrayal on two fronts.
Let's do this. One more time on the same team, right?
Right.
Joy pointing out that Riley won't go against her core beliefs, Anxiety then just tosses them out the window. There's so many metaphors, double meanings, and puns here, I can't even keep up. Riley goes for Val's team, leaving Grace and Bree behind, which completely succeeds at being uncomfortable to watch in the best way. The Anxiety character managed to give me secondhand anxiety. Would you look at that?
Over my dead flaming body!
Upset by this, the OG gang try to stop Anxiety from adding this new memory to Riley's core beliefs, to which Anxiety initiates a full takeover of Riley's mind.
Riley's life is more complex now. It requires more sophisticated emotion.
The fact embarrassment immediately grabs them all also gives the vibes that they'd conspired to do this before they came up to headquarters. Shady move, Anxiety. Something I appreciate here as well is that even as Anxiety overhauls the joint, she doesn't suddenly turn into a completely different character. I'm looking at you, Big Hero 6 / most Disney twist villains. Despite coming into the antagonist role, her actions are still motivated from being anxious for Riley's future.
You just aren't what she needs anymore, Joy.
Yeah, that sounds like teenagehood. Alright.
You can't just bottle us up?
She proceeds to bottle them up. That's right, the movie's dilemma kicks off with her core emotions literally being bottled up. You'll love to see it. It also raises the stakes from the first movie, and despite there now being a whole secondary cast of emotions, we actually get some quality screen time of the main 5 altogether. In the last movie, joy and sadness were separated from them for most of the runtime, and so it's also just great to see the other 3 outside of the headquarters too. Can't wait for the third movie where we have an even bigger ensemble doing another pathing run through everything. Well, who knows, maybe Joy will be the one to stay in the headquarters for once.
Now, let's change everything about you.
Oh, that's such an unsettling line, and really sets the stakes for the rest of the movie. As they go down to the belief system, another design detail I'm a fan of is how spiky and unstable the strands from Anxiety's memories are. They've effectively managed to visualize anxious energy on screen. Over to the bottled up gang, and they are brought down to the vault with Riley's locked away secrets.
We are suppressed emotion!
They really just keep coming out with these. The humor in this scene is just absolutely bang on throughout.
You know what we call that? Denial.
As we're introduced to the Blue's Clues / Dora the Explorer / Bluey stand-in.
Here's a little secret. Riley still likes the show.
From the idea to having him in there as a 2D animated character, it's all just fantastic. Adding a completely unhinged twist on the talking to camera trope as well, it's just so well executed.
Who are you talking to? My friends.
Something about it being right against a dark wall with his shadow gives the whole bit a kind of darker edge in a way that they know they can get away with.
Welcome to your eternal fate.
The video game character is also great.
Long to be a hero, but darkness haunts my past.
He has a whole Duke Kaboom arc across this one scene. Sorry to keep bringing it back to Toy Story, I'll stop here, but honestly, it's made by the same studio, right? So come on, cut me some slack.
Watch this!
It's weird that it probably took so much effort to deliberately animate these outdated graphics in an otherwise fully 4K movie. The slightly pixelated edges around his design, what is that called? Anti-aliasing, as well as the limited character motion is impeccably well observed. And let's face it, most Pixar employees now grew up on excessive video games. They know exactly what they were gunning for here, and it's the audience too. Kids have the exact same problem. I did.
I must be leaving you.
I also still hold on to a little headcanon theory that this character was initially a female character, leaning more into the idea that Riley is holding the secret that she maybe has a crush on girls in her reality, but hence why maybe this guy's a little bit more long-haired and leaning towards that direction. I at least see it as a headcanon, personally. And of course, our final addition to this vault comes in the form of Orion and the Duck. I mean, the deepest, darkest secret. In case you missed it first time round, I won't ruin the post-credit scene that reveals what it is, but I didn't find the reveal that funny. In fact, the first time I watched this movie, the voice was so low, I didn't fully hear what he even said. And we all know about telling the same joke twice. I rewatched it with subtitles and was left disappointed. Honestly, I found the whole character funnier when I didn't know what the secret was. At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter when considering the movie as a whole, so not the end of the world. And of course, I'd be amiss for not mentioning the reveal of Pouchy.
Which one do you think will work the best? Tomato, a frog, exploding dynamite.
And in a twist of fate, Lance's power move actually works and helps them escape.
Well, there's a lid for every pot.
Love that line.
I bet Anxiety would have a really good plan.
I also appreciate the consistency of Fear being more favorable of Anxiety because, of course he would.
Follow the stream of consciousness.
With the cut-out animation plan sequence, I like to think that that's because the emotions think in two-dimensional visuals. That weirdly just seems to make sense. In saying that, the cut-out version of Anxiety looks like the Babadook's child, so can we burn that please? Hey there, thank you for making it halfway through this video. Come along and subscribe if you haven't already to see more amazing movie breakdowns. And let's get back to the second half of the amazing Inside Out 2. And in having all of them out of their comfort zone together, I like that we quickly see their emotional traits kick into the situation.
This is a dead end.
Those are the worst kinds of ends.
Meanwhile, Anxiety has Riley up early to do some training. I'm gonna have to keep praising the animation here, but the sweat and red exhaustion on Riley's face is just one of those details that is not only impressive to pull off at all, but is so instrumental in illustrating how Riley's pushing herself. For a small detail, it plays a huge part in communicating this, even for people who don't consciously zone in on it. I mean, how do you get light to reflect off of a character's sweaty face and not make them look uncanny? You put a foot wrong here and Riley's gonna look like she's made out of some cheap sandwich ham, you know?
Val is sharing things with us.
Man, Val wouldn't be inviting Riley along to hang out if she knew she was carrying an ensemble of little characters that were completely obsessed with her inside of her head.
I'd give anything for a piece of pizza right now.
Hop on something delicious.
Another smooth as hell transition from headquarters to back to Joy & Co. I just want to see the moment that was tackled in the storyboarding. So she says to her friend that she'd love pizza, and that brings us back to the main cast where they can use said pizza as a boat. Obvious when you think about it. At this point, we get the next step in distinguishing this movie from the original, sending Sadness away on her own solo mission. Ultimately, the last movie resolved the core relationship with Joy and Sadness.
Not me.
Yes, Sadness, you could do it.
So we don't necessarily need to be dwelling on them having any more dysfunctional back and forth again. Joy also delegating by sending Sadness up there is another sign of their growth and healthy relationship.
You are strong.
It also brings some agency back to the console room rather than just having the new bunch just doing whatever they want upstairs to absolutely no obstacles until the third act. Also, finding those walkie-talkies, I'm just saying, a movie about an abstract mind world that has some license to bend the rules still knew you needed a plausible explanation for how the characters could communicate with each other. Doesn't always happen.
Go for Joy. Copy that. Over. Oh, I love him.
Going their separate ways, the cut-betweens of main gang and headquarters continues through food.
You want one? We hate those things. They taste like cardboard.
As they hop aboard the broccoli, we meanwhile have anxiety continue to corrupt the belief system. I promise I'm not trying to make these all sound like double meanings, it's literally the movie, and this is when we have the notebook introduced.
Only because everything Coach thinks about you is in there.
I'm having real problems with this character, in the way that the movie wants you to have, admittedly. Over to more uncomfortable interactions. Genuinely can't look at the screen on this moment. They also just capture that image of when a whole group of people stare at you with confusion really well. Those moments where you try and say something you thought made sense, but instead you're greeted by a room of perplexed faces. It's pretty much the worst feeling on the planet. And again, a really nuanced sense of embarrassment. Doesn't need to be a whole, my entire trousers fell down, I slipped on a banana, fell down 17 flights of stairs, and landed on top of the bumper of a car that was being driven by my crush. You know what I mean?
Look, I don't like her words, and I do not like her actions. I just think I can change her.
Oof, you don't want to go down that relationship road, buddy. The cringe is not over yet either, as we have the whole hangout scene of Riley trying to fit in. But it does lead us into what a lot of people consider the best gag of the movie, and it's very fitting that Ennui is the one to deliver it.
I love Get Up and Glow. Love Get Up and Glow.
Yep, it's time for the sarcasm. On its own, a decent enough pun. However, the fact that they build a whole comedy set piece out of it
Boy, are we so lucky we ran into you guys.
is just so grand. Also a lesson, remember kids, every time you're sarcastic, a giant crack forms in your brain.
Love Get Up and Glow.
Unfortunately, it can't last forever, and we have to face the complete clown Riley's making of herself.
Get Up and Glow is so awesome.
You love Get Up and Glow.
You can tell they've done a good job because I cannot relax throughout this entire scene, and the cutbacks to the emotion just make the discomfort in this scene all the more impactful.
See? As long as we like what they like, we have all the friends we need.
Lucky you, now Riley can spend whole scenes with her arms folded like these guys. Seriously, there's so much arm folding from these big shots. Meanwhile, Joy finds her breaking point with the rest of the gang.
If Joy can't see that, she's delusional.
Of course I'm delusional.
We've seen Joy feeling sad before, but seeing her snapping like this makes sense for someone who basically exists to stay positive 24 hours a day. A common struggle probably shared by whoever has to wear those damn costumes in Disneyland.
Jiminy, mother, loving toaster strudel.
Just an opportunity to point out that family movie alternatives to cursing are often funnier than actually cursing. From here, it's something about her wholesome, glowing character design that really makes you bummed out when she's upset. Look at her little tear. We hate to see it.
Riley doesn't need us as much as she needs them.
And unfortunately, it's not the last time we'll have to contend with sad Joy either. However, this scene does end wholesomely with the rest of the gang realizing they need to step up in order to help her.
We're right behind you.
Even here, the visuals are incredible. Fictionally, it may just be the landscape of Riley's head, but make no mistake, this would have been as expensive and tiresome to animate as a full cityscape. Look at the cranes, that's basically what they've done. Back to headquarters, as Anxiety tries to get everyone to stay focused, it further reminded me of the differences between the two movies. In the original, Joy's issue was trying to push Riley to constantly stay positive and ignore the issues at hand, whereas Anxiety is very much the reverse and tackling every single potential issue head on, which Embarrassment has clearly realized isn't a good thing as he goes to help hide Sadness. Just through a few looks, I love the interactions that these two have. Just like with Gromit, you can see everything Embarrassment is thinking through his eyes and eyebrows.
Mount Rushmore?
Those are her top 4?
Meanwhile, we get to see how puberty has also affected Imagination Land.
Extra! Typing hot rumors right out the mill!
Oh, didn't know Elon Musk had a windmill. Again, I appreciate the pun that the rumor mill is coming out of an actual mill. Not to mention Anxiety hiding her worst case scenario factory under the pillow fort. The whole concept for this room is genius, and of course the animators knew exactly how to pull off having the workers at little animation desks. This, if anything, is probably what Pixar actually looks like now. Imagine that big 1984 looking screen but with Pete Docter's face instead of Anxiety. Who knows, maybe the whole look of this bit was even the animators letting off some steam given their current situation. I mean, just take a look at this exhausted looking guy going for a break. I'm kidding. The animators probably didn't get a break on this movie. This may be one of the best of Pixar's latest productions, but it's well worth remembering those unfortunate details in the background. Also, knowing the level of detail in this movie, I bet the look of all these little bean workers are probably actually based off of some of the animators. And they're going to get all sorts of screen time soon with Dream Productions going on later this month. Beyond the references to animators, the way these scenarios are fed into Riley's thoughts is also, once again, a great visualization of how Anxiety does its damage.
Now's the time to send up every possible thing that could go wrong.
And the way that it turns an imagination system into a source of fear and anxiety is just so well communicated. And as the gang starts messing up her operation, we perhaps get Anxiety at her creepiest.
Joy, I know you're in there.
Ugh, there's just something about Anxiety literally dictating Riley's imagination like this that's pretty sinister. On the other end, the workers excited to see Joy there is also just a great little moment and leads us to the full revolt.
I see you, 87. A cat!
Love that guy. On to more fuel for the Pixar animator revolution.
It's got you all chained to desks.
Pencils down! Projections off!
The irony is definitely not lost on this one.
Art teacher!
Underappreciated!
I really hope these gags were genuinely added in protest. I absolutely love it.
Ooh, Supreme Court Justice! Yes!
Don't look up Project 2025, Riley. Meanwhile, with her projections thwarted, Team Anxiety resort to waking up Riley to look at the notebook that her terrible new friends took the time to tell her about. As she gets up, the blue light from the window reflected on her face absolutely recreates that feeling of anxiety hitting you in the middle of the night. This scene also reminds us that Anxiety is doing all this because she cares about Riley.
Are we pushing her too hard?
This one hesitation in her actions is great at punctuating that she isn't out to hurt Riley. That's definitely the result of her actions, but it's not what she's trying to do. There's more nuance to this antagonism. It also makes total sense that envy is the one that ultimately drives her to go after what's in that book as well. The layers, man, the layers! Onto a classic bit of sneaking to the coach's office, but without the threat of a time-shattering paradox like Back to the Future Part 2. Here, we just have potential expulsion for accessing confidential information, albeit in a room that's for some reason isn't locked. Scratch that, the entire building is unlocked. In fact, the only obstacle is the most ineffective security guard ever. It's alright though, I'm sure that Riley got butted by the CCTV footage after. Because she never gets caught here, but in fairness, it would have been a brief third act if she was. This isn't Top Gun Maverick where you can steal a military plane and get a promotion instead of life imprisonment. A lot of strange external movie references today. Besides, how many times have we seen this kind of scene with them getting caught? It's much more refreshing to see Riley learning that it was a bad idea through actually succeeding with her actions, only to discover something she didn't want to see. However, for a short moment, it looks like she thinks better, because Sadness has used her smarts and grabbed Ennui's phone, complete with Ennui hilariously breaking from their chill for the only time in the movie.
Where's my phone? No!
Of course, she quickly gets rumbled. And quick side note, I always think Sadness looks particularly sweet when Anxiety pulls the blanket off of her. For a second, anyway. She gets stuffed into a bucket soon after that. Sadness now restrained, Riley finally reads the forbidden book and...
Not ready yet?
Honestly, I'd find the fact that that's all she's written much more hurtful than what it actually says. Like, wow, not even a great deal of notes in this notebook. Panic for new ideas, Anxiety brings on...
The brainstorm!
I hate that you can't even get angry at these puns considering they've managed to build hugely creative set pieces around them. Having the light bulbs we've seen in the console room coming up from these brainstorms just completely makes sense, and it's a genuinely great action sequence as well. The whirling storm lit up by the bulbs is an exceptional visual, even giving the storm sequence from Up some competition. Must be what Christmas in Kansas looks like. Even the bulbs dropping through the clouds with the sound of bombs during the London Blitz is another one of those little ideas that leaves you wondering how they got to that idea. And also, did that exist before 1940? Like, did caveman brains have Blitzkrieg references inside them? Do Americans get 9/11? However, a little idea is not what they're looking for, and Anxiety needing a bigger idea directly impacts the size of the storm.
That's our way out!
And there it is, a big ol' Anxiety light bulb. We've already established different colors with orbs, now we've got actual light bulbs for ideas as well. It makes almost too much sense, it writes itself. The gang grab onto it for their escape, but that doesn't stop it reaching headquarters.
That's a big idea.
But this does give us another iconic moment from Fear.
You have a parachute?
The real question is, why don't any of you?
I'm sorry, Bill Hader. I think Tony Hale did a pretty good job in this one as well. It's a shame that, considering it became the highest grossing animated movie of all time, Moana 2 not included, Disney wasn't willing to pay the original voice actors' rates. However, I guess I'm glad that the two new actors got a good gig. Bill Hader and Mindy Kaling have plenty of work to keep them busy. Why voice Disgust when you can oversee a bastardization of Scooby-Doo anyway? As the gang make it to the back of the mind, Anxiety's spiky new sense of beliefs is almost fully formed. The first result of this big light bulb, turn her fringe red. Okay, sure. That checks out as a dumb thing a teenager would do. Cue awkward encounter with friends she's walked away from.
He wouldn't know cool if it hit them in the face.
I'm starting to think that Ennui's just stoned. And as a raging workaholic, this sequence of Riley going in for her early sesh really speaks to me. But what I do like about them handling this arc for Riley is that, like Anxiety, they don't completely change her into a different person. In moments like this, you can still see she's still the same timid, awkward kid from the start of the movie.
Yeah, I will.
Even with all the cringy stuff we've seen her do throughout this movie, we're still rooting for her to be alright. With the emotions being these absurd caricatures, they never forget that Riley herself should act like a normal teenage girl, not a cartoon character. The next phase of Anxiety's big idea transpires to be scoring 3 goals, outdoing Val's freshman record of 2. Of course, as the game begins, forgetting that she's on a team in the process. Which, in a team-based sport, isn't the best way to go about it. Meanwhile, the main gang climb up the mountain at the back of the mind.
I'm a good person.
I love that this line is now full of hesitation. It's now a thought at the back of her mind, so of course, it's losing strength as a self-belief for Riley. It also makes this next moment hit all the more as Anxiety completes her new, much more unstable sense of self, completely built on anxious thought.
I'm not good enough.
The amount of truth this line carries is absolutely chilling. For all of us who've experienced anxiety, it pretty much puts into words that core feeling we have when anxiety takes over our self-perception. This is the point where everyone realizes that perhaps anxiety has not led them down the best path, this thought echoing across the entire mind.
I'm not good enough.
The fallout of this begins with embarrassment pulling his hood down for I think the first time and releasing sadness from a bucket. Oh, hang on. Crying in buckets? Oh, for God's sake, they've done it again! However, Anxiety quickly notices Sadness try to thwart her plan and destroys the whole tube system. Nice going, buddy. On to this movie's defeated Joy scene. Bing Bong might be gone, but we still need the big feels scene. To be fair, this is also a good one.
Joy!
This time, Joy realizing that throwing all of these thoughts to the back of the mind wasn't necessarily a great idea. Looking at the now faded I'm a good person belief, we once again have to contend with her distraught little face. And to the killer line, once again engineered to break all the adults watching.
Maybe this is what happens when you grow up. You feel less joy.
Oh, it hurts because really, the way she puts it is true. We still, of course, do feel joy as we get older. However, the hard realities of the world that many of us are, fortunately enough, less aware of as a child come into play. Even in these movies, we've seen different emotions as the leader in parents' minds, seemingly reflecting this line here. And in this movie, Joy has already had a preview of being disposed as the dominant emotion and what that could entail for Riley later on. It's also thematically resonant with a lot of Pixar stories. I mean, they are essentially made by people who don't want to grow up. Whether in Toy Story, The Incredibles, or even Up, there's a core longing to hold on to the joy of youth and the highs of life as we ourselves are growing away from it. To not lose that sense of fun, which these movies also play a part in keeping for a lot of us. As the game goes on, Riley's anxious determinations descends into zoning into herself and forgetting about everyone else around her and passing to nobody. Meanwhile, we get a great bit of payoff to get the gang back to headquarters.
I have an idea, but I really don't like it.
They also continue to excel at keeping the character's core attributes in there, with a lot of Anger's motions still underpinned by his, well, anger. Lewis Black as this character is delightful.
Oh, Pouchy!
On to my favorite individual moment.
Roll of tape, rubber duck.
No time!
Even though it's just a cartoon bag, the action is so visceral, it just gets me every time. Like a cranial Guy Fawkes, the gang strip Pouchy's innards bare of dynamite to blow up the back of the mine mountain. And once again, this sequel's visuals with what I'll call the sea of brain marbles is absolutely top tier Pixar. Meanwhile, the consequences of Riley's self-absorption manifest when...
Grace, are you okay?
Riley hits her reality check moment, injuring the person she'd once helped pick pennies off of the floor for. The curtain falling away, anxiety can no longer have the self-absorption and determination to masquerade behind. She's laid out bare, in Riley literally just having to sit in it. Which leads us to the moment that everyone left this movie raving about. Perhaps the best realization of an anxiety attack ever achieved on film. Every creative decision here is absolutely on the money. The booming heartbeat, the electricity sparking out of anxiety as she speeds around the console, descending into a full storm that overwhelms the console. Once Joy's reached her, even her being so fast that she's out of sync yet also paralyzed just weirdly makes sense. When experiencing anxiety, it does have this paradoxical feeling of bouncing around your mind faster than you can follow, whilst also being completely paralyzing. There's no guide on how to accurately portray this, yet it manages to make complete sense the moment you see this scene. Even the cuts to Riley externally are so true to a real person having an anxiety attack. It's the moment a lot of us think, I wish I had this movie when I was younger. In a world where our social awareness of mental health is still developing, we need movies like this that help simplify an experience like this for younger viewers. As for us adults who can relate to it, it's a powerful scene and the perfect climax for this movie. And despite being the cause of it all, this is the point where we feel sympathy for anxiety for the very first time. Just like any of the other emotions, and indeed an actual person, even she has a point where she can no longer control her anxiety. And whilst initially Joy understandably goes in with harsher tones, her empathy quickly kicks in.
You need to let her go.
However, as Joy pulls her out of the storm and they reinstate the old belief system, the anxiety storm is still going strong. And a very welcome surprise, anxiety has a moment of redemption and is the one to provide the resolution.
We don't get to choose who Riley is.
She's of course right, and we finish out the finale in the most wholesome way possible. Very neatly, the big marble spill feeds into the resolution, embracing all of Riley's qualities no longer pushed to the back of the mind. Pulling the old ones away, Joy makes way for a new and more truthful sense of self to form. It's not just the fact that anxiety came in with such a forceful feed of anxiety that was trying to warp Riley into a different character, but Joy herself was also a problem in having all of these ideas shuttled to the back of the mind. That in itself was trying to warp a better version of Riley, when the reality is you should let the system run itself. Let life take its toll as it does, to create a more accurate true self of sense that Riley always was, and up to this point has always been suppressed from feeling. Both of our main character leaders were ultimately wrong before the end of the day. And what I also like is that it doesn't immediately make the anxiety attack go away either. Rather, we have this new core belief helping her work through it. All capped off with Joy literally embracing it, followed by all the other emotions easing Riley out of it. God damn it, Pixar. They just made this emotionally engaging, high-stakes climax over one girl's anxiety attack, and yet manages to make something more powerful than any third act of a Marvel movie. It hurts that there have been some behind-the-scenes turmoil because when it comes to the final result, they're just the best. And for the closing moments of this scene, the cut back to the emotions come away for a second. With Riley taking a breath and grounding herself before placing her hand on the bench, there's just no one who does it better. They make these small actions huge in impact.
I was such a jerk to you guys. I freaked out.
I loved this moment is just shown as Riley speaking to herself without having to show an emotion pressing buttons to leave its impact. It brings the whole story around to what's important. Many movies have done the winning isn't everything character arc, but this is so much more than that.
I'm so sorry.
It's a message of self-accountability, embracing both the positive and negative qualities of yourself, and how the bad things you do in life don't automatically make you a bad person. There is always forgiveness. And because the feels weren't already enough, joy is at last summoned back to the console. The movie finishes off as it begins with a quick narrated cut through of where Riley's at now, but also with some movie-long payoffs. Now with all the emotions working side by side and anxiety having a special chair to keep herself from going overboard.
Oh yeah, that's the stuff.
And it's great to get a peek into how anxiety can work functionally in our minds.
Riley has a Spanish test tomorrow. We need to study. Oh, you're right.
Considering we don't really have a choice in whether anxiety is a part of our lives or not, it's good that they took a moment to show the character working alongside the others. She's not gonna go away, but that's not entirely a bad thing, provided we find ways of keeping her in check. Plus, the existence of anxiety from a caveman perspective has left us alive in the grand scheme of things, and you know, the fear of predators wanting to eat us and stuff. And of course, there's this moment.
She's got this.
And she's got us! Ooh!
Again, remember they got Paul Walter Hauser to make some noises and this one line. What a paycheck.
We love all of our girl.
And there we are, a wholesome ending to a wholesome movie. And I presume that ending look means that she did make the team. Well done, buddy. And that is all. Honestly, though I don't think this is an absolute perfect movie, there is so much to love about it on the rewatch. I enjoyed it a lot more this time around, and I'm taken aback by, among other things, how intelligently put together it is and handles its subjects. A reminder that, for now at least, Pixar's still got it and can only hope that they can hold on to that as Disney pushes them for more sequels. I'm still worried about that. But if there is anything that has the most possibility with sequels, it is Inside Out. And taking on those little extra layers of what emotion is interrupting what emotion in any given micro scene is a great lens to enjoy these kind of movies, whether intentional or not. But for now, of course, Pixar are still firing on most cylinders and can put out a modern classic in the form of the amazing Inside Out 2. But on that note, my name's been Daz,